Hi there. Hello and welcome to a tutorial on creating a basic tile set for a game. I'm using the pixel art based software Piskel at piskelapp.com. I've just created a blank sprite here, and I'm going to do a little bit of setting up of the canvas in order to make sure that you've got everything the same as me. So the first thing you want to do is go over to the right side, this little box right here that says resize. And you want to make sure that you've changed the size of it to 48 by 48. Make sure you hit the resize button. So in order to accept the new size, so click that. I'm also going to go here to my preferences, which is this gear. I'm going to go to my grid here, in the grid tab, make sure my grid is enabled, and I'm going to set that grid up at 16 by 16 pixels. What this does is this gives us a nice nine box square here. Each of these squares in the grid is about 16 by 16 pixels, which is kind of the basic breakdown of what you want to be using when you're doing any kind of tile set. It's kind of one of the base tile set sizes when doing pixel art. Other thing I want to do right next to grid here under preferences is I want to go to tile mode. And I want to make sure I have a tile mode enabled. I'm going to bring down the mask opacity to about like 0.2. And if I zoom out here, you can kind of see as I move my pencil around, it's moving around in those surrounding spaces as well. Basically, this creates a seamless tile pattern, and it's useful for creating, especially the edges as you're working on the design. Now, yours might be a little bit less complex than mine, or a little bit more, depending on how much time you want to spend on it. But I'm going to go over the basics of the whole process here to create these. Okay, so what I'm going to do first is I'm going to use my paint bucket tool, and I'm going to change my primary color here by clicking on it, dragging down my hue selector into the greens. I'm just going to find sort of a dark-ish green, kind of as a base grass layer. I'm going to fill this whole square with a base grass green. You can see it pops up here in my palette. The important thing when you're doing a grass tile set specifically, and this actually goes for most tile sets where you're going for more of a sort of a textural look as a background element, so you want to keep your contrast really low. So if I go here to my color selector, you can see here this little white circle is the color I currently am using. I'm only going to adjust this slightly, barely perceptibly upwards to get a slightly lighter color. And then if I zoom in here, I'm going to basically create some sort of repeating patterns of little grass blades, often using only 1 to 2 pixels, and then kind of keeping them on a kind of like a line here, right? So thinking about them always coming up from like a shared ground point, kind of like we're looking at it from the overhead position. Um, if you're just like randomly sort of scribbling here, it's not going to look very good. You want it to feel like these different grass blades are coming up from a spot out of sort of a shared base. If you don't do that, it starts to look a little weird. It's important to remember, keep things kind of random, use some basic sort of repeating shapes here. I often like to do 2 pixels and then one at a 45-degree angle, and then maybe going the other way, and then maybe a couple like little small ones like that. I'm just going to work my way through here like this, creating some basic grass pieces. Uh, really feel free to experiment, play around with this a little bit. I'm trying to create, little clusters of detail together, and then in some blank spaces in between. Okay, so I've got a few coming on here. One thing you also want to look at, especially, it's a little hard to see up here in the top corner because my contrast is low, which is what I want it to be. But just making sure that occasionally you even like go like right to the edge here, and then you pick it up from the other side, right? So if I move my mouse here and I create a piece of grass, I want to move my mouse to the other side just to kind of have it continue through that space. That way you don't get a um, very obvious sort of like break line. That also goes for here. So if I go here and I created like a couple base pieces along the top, I'd then look down, kind of see them right there, and I'd continue them on here. That just helps to create a little bit more of a seamless variation. I'm going to slightly adjust my mouse color again, and maybe throw a couple of highlights on some of these, like the tops of some of these blades of grass, just to draw them out just a little bit more. Um, Find that that works really nicely to kind of help pull some of the details out without it being too strong. Number one issue I see when students are doing this or people are trying to work on a tile set is you've got a little bit too much contrast. You want to keep the contrast quite low at this point. And then I'm going to go in, I'm going to choose here in my color palette. So you can see I have three very, very similar greens. I'm going to choose my darkest green, which is my base color. And go a little darker than that, just barely. Now at this point, I think that might even be a little too dark. I'm going to bring it up a little bit. Just use my fill tool here to fill it in. Yeah, that works a little bit better. And I'm just going to try and create some linear based, just a little bit of shading here, kind of in groups, just to give it a little bit more. You can even see it, especially here, starting to show up a little bit. Remember, making sure to go over those edges, right? You want to be going over the edges here so that it feels not quite so constrained to the square. I'm just adding a little bits of shading here to make it feel a little bit more like grass. Just, stick a few little pixels pointing up to give it a little grass texture. You can see you're starting to get a really nice texture there. And it's actually working quite well. I now have a base grass texture. If I zoom out here and I go to my preferences, and we're going to go to our mask opacity, you can see this is the square of texture we've made. And if I turn my mask opacity down, you can see that I have now created a seamless grass texture. It actually looks quite good. Um, really feels like just like a little field of grass. So this is the basis of a really basic just background tile. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure I'm over here in my layers palette. Right now we're on layer one. I'm going to double click on that and call it grass, hit enter or return to accept the new text there. And what I'm going to do is we're going to begin the process of creating a wall tile. Now, this wall tile, we're going to create 9 different parts of it. A couple of them are going to be repetitive, but I find it's always nice to have all 9 so you can see how they'd work together in tandem. And so we're going to create a corner piece right here, a center repeating piece, a corner piece, 2 vertical pieces, top corners, and then a middle piece right there. I'm going to start with this one right here, just because that's the easiest one and it's kind of the one we build them all off of. I'm going to make sure that I go to my layers palette. I'm going to create a new layer. I'm going to call this layer by double clicking wall. Give me like a stone wall. Now, my grass is faded out because I'm currently on the wall layer, so it's kind of faded out in the background. That's fine. I can go here. I'm going to choose and actually just push this towards yellow because I like to bring just a little bit of warmth. So as opposed to bringing my color right here to the side, true sort of monochromatic gray, I like to bring it in just a little bit to have some warmth to it. I'm going to go with like a light-ish gray. And I'm going to use my box tool. I'm going to start with just creating this box here, and I'm going to fill it in. That's going to be my sort of my base level. And then I'm going to grab my slightly darker gray. Now, at this point, I am going to switch up my grid just so that I can kind of break this down into 4s. Right now we're using 16 by 16 grid, but now I'm just going to be working just in here, and so having a slightly smaller grid will be beneficial. So I'm going to go to my preferences, my grid, and take this down to 4 pixels, and zoom down here, just so we can see it nice and big. You can kind of see what I'm working on. So we got about 4 pixels here in each of these. And I know a couple things for certain, and one of those things is that I want to make sure that my sort of breaks in my wall all happen along these lines. So the first thing I want to do is I want to kind of define these 4 top blocks right here as kind of like the top of my wall. So I'm going to click here, make a square, fill this in. Now we have like a very basic 2-tone wall, right? Here's the top of the wall, here's the side of the wall. Now we're going to start adding in a little bit of details, all based upon these dividing things by 4. One of the tricks to making a good sort of low resolution pixel art wall is making sure you have some basic things like edge highlights. So what I like to do right along this edge right here is just do a little highlight, kind of like the sun is catching the edge of that, just kind of pushing it out a little bit, make it a little brighter. And using my stroke tool, I'm just going to click and drag to add a nice little edge highlight there. And I'm going to find my darker gray, and I'm going to go a little darker than it currently is, and we're going to just drop in some base sort of like wall, like sort of layers of brick, right? Each of these is kind of about the same. We got 1, 2, 3, and the fourth is kind of the dividing line there. And we're going to stick to the inside part right here. So we're going to go 1, 2, 3 there, 2, 3, and also on the outside edge. So each brick is approximately sort of 8 pixels, including the mortar line. Then I can do the same right here, right? This is the halfway point, and that is the halfway point there. These are now the same size. And this will nicely, I can like copy and paste it several times, and it's going to have this really nice repeating pattern, all based upon dividing things by 4. Now, this is the top here, right? So this right here is the side of the brick, and then this is the top of the brick. So we have to continue this line up. And what I like to do to save on colors is just utilize the side color here for the mortar color here, because this is a lighter color. So I'm just going to use that original, see, this is the mortar color right here. So I'm going to actually continue this up like this, right? So we have the top of the brick and the edge. And I am also going to give it just a little cap there on the other side. It just helps kind of define it a little bit cleaner. And then using a slightly darker color right there, right? Like the highlight is still catching it. You still want like that. So I'm using this top color right here, which is like 1 shade darker than my highlight color, to put in that edge connection here of the mortar line. That'll give me a really nice um, sort of transition that still feels pretty legit. Okay, the last thing I want to do, I'm just going to move in a little bit here, is I want to go in and do a little bit more detail, just give this thing a bit more depth and texture, and choose my darkest color, which was our mortar lines here. I'm going to choose a step a little bit more than that. And I like to go in right into the corners here where they connect. Just adds this sort of illusion of a little bit more depth there at that connection point, right? Like it's kind of like almost going in just a little bit more. I find that works really nicely. And then choosing my base color here, just going to slightly adjust it. Just use it to throw in a little bit of variation here on these, just to make them a little dirtier, especially even on this one on the base here. Like bring that sort of dirt and texture a little bit more on the bottom one, right? Because it's close to the ground. It almost shades it in slightly. Whereas the one in the middle has a little bit, and the one on the top, maybe not quite so much, right? That's going to create that nice sort of transition. I'm going to do the same thing here in the top, except that I'm going to actually use my lighter color to almost have some like edge highlights. And that's going to give me some little highlights there, kind of like stone being caught. Okay. That's looking pretty good. I'm going to momentarily turn off my grid so you can see that kind of what it looks like without the grid itself. Now I'm going to use this to create all the rest of the sort of stone tile aspects of this project. So I'm going to go back to my grid. I'm going to turn it back on. I'm going to go back to 16 pixel, close it down. And I'm going to use the selection tool. I'm going to select this tile, hit Control or Command C, depending on if you're on Mac or PC. Then I'm going to drag the selection over. It gives me a little dark preview of where it's going to paste. And Control V to paste. And I'm going to paste it twice. Right, so we got, now you can actually see here on my preview, it's like this seamless wall moving all the way across, nicely tiled. Then I'm going to go in with my eraser tool, and we're going to use this edge of this brick right here. It's kind of the edge of the edge of the design right here. So I'm going to go in. I'm going to erase this little bit right here. Yeah, I think that's a good spot. I'm going to do the same thing on this side. Okay, that's looking pretty good. I've got what? 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, so each of these is about the same size. I'm going to go through here, just do a quick check right there. I'm going to pull that color, and then we're just going to kind of cap it off, right? And cap it off here, cap it off there. Grab our darkest color just to make sure that that little edge piece kind of gets set in there nicely. And then we're also going to cap this edge right there. Looks like that's the slightly darker version. Let's go with the lighter version here. Okay. That gives us now a really nice little brick edge. And we're going to use that to, right, this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. It's about the same height. We're going to just use this top of this brick right here to create a wall going all the way up. First, we're going to take this lower wall and we're going to move it to the top as well. So let's use our selection tool, select it, Control C to copy, click and drag the thing we want to paste. Right, so directly above, paste it in there. And then I'm just going to repeat this process that I just did. So I'm going to select these four. This is a 4 pixel chunk, right? So we have 1, 2, 3, 4. So it works in that dividing by 16. This thing's 48, so it also is divisible. So Control C, then just drag it up, paste, drag it up, paste, drag it up, paste, up, paste, up, paste, up, paste, up, paste. I can actually just bring it right over to this side now. Up, paste, paste. There we go. You kind of get the picture here, right? So 4 of these basically brick chunks can be brought in at a time. Now, I actually think that this is a good opportunity to go in. I think we have almost, it looks like too many bricks here. I kind of want to like have them turned on their side. Not easy enough to do. I'm just going to grab my color here, and we're just going to erase, right? So every other one, right? Now it looks like the wall is kind of turned. No, we're going to have to do a slight adjustment here. I'm going to go back a few. I'm going to start here at the bottom, and then we're going to adjust from there. Okay, that, like that. Now it's not a perfect because we actually would probably almost want to like alternate these, but for now we're going to leave it just kind of like got a little like half corner block here, and then I'm just going to do kind of the opposite on the other side, right? So I'm going to bring it down like this and just give you nice top bricks. I find these a little repetitive too, so I'm just going to randomize these top patterns just a little bit so they're not quite so obviously repeating, right? So you don't want something that looks quite so obvious in its repetition. I think the other thing we might want to do even is just go in here. Oops, a little less dark here. I think just right here and just add in a little bit more separation between these two, just to make sure it just really stands out. Um, yeah, that's looking a little bit better. I actually kind of like that. I might even go in so far as to just like darken up this line right here. Using my stroke tool is actually probably faster, just all the way around, because I kind of like how that looks. Just that back line being a little bit darker gives it just a little bit more punch. What I am going to do now is under my preferences, I'm going to go to my miscellaneous, and I'm just going to turn my layer opacity down so that you can actually see the whole thing here. You can see both layers at once. And I think on this wall, I'm going to add in a little bit of grass. So I'm just going to go in here and just kind of break up this bottom section a little bit, right? Just kind of blends it in nicely. Back there a little bit. I like how that looks. Just adds a little bit more blending between the colors of the ground it's sitting on and the actual grass that it rests on, right? So just breaks up the bottom of that wall a little bit, adds a little bit more realism, right? You're using very simple pixel art here, so you're trying to do a lot with a little, and any kind of suggestion you can kind of make helps a little bit with kind of creating that illusion, right? Even just breaking up the edge a little bit with a few grass pieces, maybe even going so far as to like add a little bit of a like light highlight here and there just to even break it up a little bit more. Okay, that's looking pretty good. Okay, so we zoom out here and you take a look up here, you can see that we have this really nice little repeating tile set. We have a tile right here that's going to represent a vertical tile. We have a corner tile. We have a middle tile that can be used. These can be combined in it's a whole bunch of different ways to create an entire level of walls for your game. Uh, Really basic but really easy way to create a tile set. In my next video, I'm going to show you how to take this and kind of cut it apart so that you can use it in a video game.